Welcome to On Location. Today we have with us Vern, the one-arm, what was it?
The one-arm bandit.
The one-arm bandit, and arm wrestling champion. Vern, it's a pleasure to have you here, sir.
Very nice to meet you.
So let's talk about who you are a little bit, and then we're gonna start asking questions and stuff like that.
For sure. So Vern Martel is my name. I'm from Prince George, BC.
Yeah.
And I'm really known for the sport of arm wrestling. Arm wrestling, wrist wrestling, kind of a amalgamated sport now.
Yeah.
But I kind of had my choice when I was younger of what type of competitions I wanted to enter, and so I pursued both of them, and took it as high as I could prior to my accident, which you'll learn more about. But I was fortunate enough that when I was 21, I went down to Costa Rica and won my first world championship, which was actually the first world championship that Prince George ever had out of any sport. So I was recognized by the city of Prince George for bringing home the first world championship out of any sport to Prince George back in 1983.
How old were you?
I was 21.
21?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's insane. So let's go back and start it from when you were very young. Were you like really a good athlete? Like,
yes.
What did you play? What are some of the things you were playing?
So in school, I mean, I would have to say academically, sports was where I was my strong point. All the way through school, I always recognized that I'd always be in the top tier of sports that I'd be involved in, and it was just because of my athletic ability, and then not only that, it was just the build of my body. I just found that I was much stronger on the upper half of my body compared to the lower. So anything that had to do with the upper part of the body, I excelled at.
So what kind of sports did you play?
Anything from soccer, volleyball, baseball, gymnastics, got into boxing, Olympic-style wrestling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, quite a variety of different sports to make me realize and identify that I did have some good strength match to other opponents or other guys.
So let's talk about some of the sports and how you got into them and what did you achieve when you were young.
Well, baseball was one that I did quite well at, and we always played with different mixed leagues, and won a few trophies for that, won a few trophies for soccer. Like I said, I tried different martial arts in the form of whether it was taekwondo, hapkido, some boxing, and that was more or less just to protect myself, because the school that I went to, which was, can I say schools in town?
Yeah.
It's not even there anymore. It's burnt down. Blackburn School. A lot of fighting there. And,
oh, wow.
You know, a lot of people, when they see me, I'm involved in a lot of these sports and do well at them. And they've heard about me, but it's almost like the story's bigger than the guy. When they see me, it's actually like, wow, I thought you'd be bigger. And so I was a smaller guy in school. And small guys always get picked on. So I had to learn how to defend myself. And once it was out there that I knew how to, that I had the strength, I could protect myself, you're left alone. Then you're kind of protecting your friends. So it was always something that I kind of steered in that direction to excel in physical strength.
So, I mean, like, why were so many fights in the school? Like, why? Like, what was the reason for it? Were everybody like angry, or what was it?
It was just a very rough school. It's well known in Prince George to be one of the rougher schools. Smaller districts of areas that all fed into that school. Everybody would already be meshed into their own type of little kind of like gangs, where the cool guys, kind of the guys that were your everyday guy, and then the guys that were less than fortunate with different stuff, right? That seemed to be picked on more than the rest. I was lucky I got along with both sides. Never made it a point to hang out with the cool guys, but certainly got along with them, and it was always a good challenge when I met them in wrestling and stuff like that, that I could actually take them down. So I was recognized by them that they wouldn't fool around with me as far as wanting to fight with me. But at the same time, a lot of people from the smaller areas that fed into the school, I really enjoyed meeting them. Lots of different, very interesting people, and that's what's fascinating about the world, is the type of people that you meet in your journey in life. And I really enjoyed meeting a lot of different friends. And
so let's talk about wrestling a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into wrestling, and how good were you? Let's talk about that.
Like the wrestling,
because wrestling is
Olympic
huge.
style wrestling. Actually, I did very well in it. It's something when I lived down the Okanagan. I got started down there in Okanagan Falls, and then when I come up to Prince George, moved to went to Blackburn School. Immediately, I realized how fast I had to use wrestling. You know, it's and you see it in a lot of martial arts, MMA and stuff like that, where you see the crossover of sports mesh against each other and see which ones are better than the next. Usually always comes down to takedown in wrestling, or some form, right? Or Greco type form. And so I was very lucky that people throwing punches, right away I was into their body and takedown, you know, and it was a submission, where you just take them down, choke outs, arm bars, leg locks. You know, a lot of guys did that, but I did learn that you have to make sure sometimes that the guy stayed down, because if you, even then when they said they give up, then you start walking away. Well, next thing you know, you had somebody throwing a blow to your head or trying to kick you, and so then it was a second where, okay, I got to make sure this guy is staying down, and but it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing, but it was a way of protecting myself.
No, sometimes you have no choice, right?
Yeah.
So you did a lot of choking, I assume.
A lot of chokeholds. Yeah.
So when you choked them, how long did it take for them to come back?
I wouldn't choke them out to the point of passing out. Just enough that it's tap out and they're kind of almost like gasping. And you can feel that when a person's body's starting to actually weaken. And like I said, I wasn't really an aggressive guy, but
well, you had to
a lot of
protect
times
yourself,
it was
right?
brought on. And I would do a lot of, backing away, to the point of just, a few guys there, the best thing to do is turn around and run. But sometimes you're cornered in washrooms and stuff like that inside of a stall of a washroom.
It's crazy.
Crazy stuff that people shouldn't have to deal with, but it's there in some form or another, that everybody's affected in some way. But I survived school and went on to better things.
It sounds like you was in school. It was like you were in the war zone, right?
Yeah,
It's like one of those movies, right? In the future, everybody's like, it's almost like a Mad Max scenario, right? Everybody has to fight and things like that. So talk about boxing. You were doing boxing also. What got you into boxing?
I fooled around with boxing again. Was kind of finding a sport that I knew my ground level sport with wrestling, but then you had to learn something with people grabbing you and people trying to just box you that you could stay within. And I found boxing was very good for keeping my weight. A lot of skipping, a lot of shadow boxing, a lot of hitting a bag. It was very good for keeping my weight in where I needed to as I progressed in different sports. That it was very well, worked very well for timing, worked very well for, you changing it up so that, you're not working with your strong arm, that you're throwing your jabs. You learn that all of a sudden your arm's tied behind your back and you got to learn to throw with your left. Right? So, very interesting enough, with the loss of use of my arm after an accident, reminded me so much of boxing where, geez, I have to tie this arm and I have to learn how to do everything with this arm now. But it was to develop your speed, save your strength, that you're going to have your power shot or your knockout punch was always saved with your stronger arm. So every sport brings something to the table in some unique form or technique that you can use to develop and mesh it in with other sports, and it helps you excel in different areas that you can kind of have a unique opportunity of taking a bit from each one, almost like Bruce Lee did, learned all the different martial arts, and then he, put them all together and come out with his Jeet Kune Do, and it just happened to work against everything and everybody. So, and that was something that was fascinating to me, because actually in Bruce Lee's one book, Jeet Kune Do, he mentioned in there, because he excelled so well in his martial arts, that he used to fool around with arm wrestling.
Yeah.
And he actually put it in his book in this one paragraph where he always wanted to become a world champion arm wrestler because of his straight speed and his, you know, his strong tendons and strength that he felt that he could win. So it was something that was always there as far as any sport I went in, everybody arm wrestled. So it didn't matter if you boxed or if you did martial arts, if you did wrestling. Fooling around afterwards, everybody, well, let's see how strong your arm is in arm wrestle. So it was always there all the way through my life. Brothers, sisters, you know, it was always there. And so it was weird that it was the one that kind of rose to the top that I would actually become very successful in.
So how did your passion for arm wrestling started? And then how did you go about it? Because I imagine you have to make yourself strong. You have to make your arm strong, right? So let's talk about, so I guess Bruce Lee was an influence, right?
Yes.
Okay. Was he the main influence for you to go for arm wrestling or no?
He inspired me because, I mean, he tried so many different things to work on different tendons, different types of strengths. And that's what I like doing, was doing that. I didn't really want to push myself to be like a bodybuilder, a large bodybuilder.
Those muscles don't do anything,
right? And I mean, it looks great,
well, it doesn't
but you're limited to what you can do with it.
The bigger it gets, though, you know?
Yeah. So with arm wrestling, it gave me that freedom that I could build a certain level. You know, I used to jump out of bed. That was my morning practice. 200 push-ups immediately. As soon as I rolled out of bed. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
This was like, it was in my head that I wanted to be.
How old were you at that?
15, 16.
16, you were doing this stuff at the age of 16?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's crazy.
And at that time, I was working at a plywood mill, and, you know, lots of guys from many different ages that would go outside during what they'd call a smoke break, or you'd get ahead of the system as far as you had to take a break while others caught up. And we go outside and we do chin-ups and stuff like that. So it was always a thing to do things that excelled and be strong.
So you were always training, basically?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then, like I said, that led into arm wrestling that I fooled around with it a lot, took it to world level prior to my accident. And then after my accident, you know, when I looked at all the other sports, I could no longer do them. It was too hard to do them, actually, with one arm. And so I had to learn a whole new way and a whole new form, technique, stance, everything.
So how did you start building your arm to be an arm wrestler?
Yeah, it was a lot of, you do a lot of push-ups. The best thing for arm wrestling is arm wrestling. So I'd always go and find guys throughout the years, mostly guys from the gym and stuff like that had already been working out and stuff like that. And I'd always invite them to my place, or I'd have a table set up there so I could just learn arm wrestling, just keep working on the strength developing. Nothing puts your arm in that type of position that arm wrestling does. There's too many variables that people end up twisting or moving your arm into a certain position that you could never mimic in any exercise that you do. So the only way that you can develop those inner muscles or smaller group muscles, pronation muscles and everything else, was to actually arm wrestle. So I arm wrestled a lot. Like, I'm talking like thousands and thousands of matches of just training. And then when it wasn't enough here in my own home location to find people, then I had to start traveling to other people's backyards that, you know, that I realized where their strengths were, and I had to learn different techniques, forms, and different ways of being able to come up with a move or a style that worked very well for me at the table.
How do you strengthen your tendons? What did you do? Because
tendon strength, a lot of, again, squeezing things was a big thing. Hand control is something that's plays the bigger part in an arm wrestling match, of being able to take somebody's hand, be able to control their hand so they cannot use the rest of their arm. So it didn't matter how big their arms were. I literally would look at their baby finger and consider how much strength I needed to crack open that baby finger in the bottom part of their hand to extend the rest of their arm. Once you got that, you can extend their whole arm and everything is exposed. So It was to develop those smaller muscle groups, whether I was using rolling out dumbbells to the end of my fingers and rolling them back up and catching them.
What weights are we talking about?
Like dumbbells and stuff like that. I do sets of 30 to 50 pounds.
30, 50 pounds, just rolling your fingers?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Or I found what worked really well was their steel balls that they use for crushing rocks in a rock crusher. These balls bang back and forth and break rocks. And I used to grab that thing. It looked like a cannonball.
Oh, it's heavy.
And it was very heavy. And I used to just, you'd have to hang on to it with my fingers and extend it out. But it mimicked somebody trying to explode into your hand, and you'd been able to catch them.
Would you lift it? You would leave it like this, or
like that,
like this, or
yeah,
like
that? Just like that. Sometimes I throw it and catch it, throw it and catch it to develop that response.
And that is good for these muscles.
A lot of your forearms, wrist, and your fingers. You had to work a lot with smaller weights to develop your rotator cuff in the back as well, because a lot of your inner muscles for arm wrestling, you'd pull. But if a person doesn't develop their back rotator muscle, it's very easy to rip.
When you say back rotator muscle, are we talking about this
so
thing
it's
right
right
here?
in the back of your shoulder here, right up in behind. Yeah. And nobody really feels it until they actually tear it. And,
Are you serious?
And it's so sore. It's painful, very painful.
So what do you do to develop those muscles?
Just taking a weight, hanging on to it, and just keeping it out straight and back. And
so you turn it, right?
To pull back so you can actually feel it in that. And once you start doing muscles like that and pulling it, you really start feeling that small muscle there. But you build that up because everything you do, your larger muscles seem to take everything forward. And everything you do is all forward. But how much do you work for your back, right? So,
have you ever tear one? Have you tore your rotator?
No.
You never had it?
No. It was something that I learned that...
Long time ago.
You know what? You develop that muscle. And I felt it when different matches, and I'd be like, what's going on there? Okay, I got to develop that. Everybody goes through something that's called arm wrestler's pain, where it's almost like a golfer who gets at, what's it called? Golfer's elbow or tennis elbow and stuff like that. Well, arm wrestlers get the same inside pain from pulling so much. And they literally, when they go through that pain, you have to keep your arm and you're literally sleeping up with your chest. And you don't want to stretch it out at all. So it's something with every sport. There's always some type of a thing that you got to be very cautious of and develop more.
Have you seen anybody that you were competing with that had their thing ripped?
Oh, yes.
You've seen?
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about some of them. What happened?
Many times where they've done that. And I mean, it affects them so bad they can't arm wrestle. They can't arm wrestle. They can't pick anything up. It's a long recovery, like a 6-8 month long recovery. And that's as long as letting it heal by itself. A lot of people do have to get it surgically stitched or joined again.
So they rip off, right?
Yeah.
So the muscles, they tear, right?
Yes.
They're totally separated.
Yeah. And it's just an overdevelopment or an underdeveloped muscle when everything else is being overdeveloped that a lot of people tend to miss. And that's what happens is arm wrestling soon identifies very small group muscles. You can arm wrestle somebody and feel good and strong. And if you have a long match and stuff like that,
it's different.
It's the small group muscles that afterwards you feel in your arm that you got to develop. So it's you don't have to be a big guy to be really successful in arm wrestling, but you got to have strong tendons and develop small group muscles that will work very well for you to develop those different core muscle strengths that are needed in arm wrestling.
So when he gets torn, does it connect automatically, or no? There's no way.
Slowly, muscles will kind of mend themselves.
How?
Some of them.
Because once it's torn,
it's almost like a bone. When a bone breaks, it has that little. It forms a ball around it. Muscles will form a kind of a muscle scar tissue, but then start forming new muscles underneath as well. But then you'll have scar tissue, or you have to have them surgically mended.
So when you say torn, are we talking about a little bit torn or totally torn?
Variety of what different people have done. I know people that have had to have surgery as well.
So when it's totally torn, I guess that's when you do surgery. But if it's semi-torn, then it kind of can heal, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And how does the surgery last? I mean, you've seen some people had the surgery, right?
Again, I would say roughly 6 to 8 months from what I've seen people start to take time, almost like an arm break for how long they got to stay out of the sport and gradually work with it. And and I definitely know what that's like with, like I said, with my accident stuff, all the stuff I had to do with physiotherapy and stuff like that to develop, and muscle has a tendency to atrophy fast when you're not using it. So to build muscle back up again and strengthen your body after anything that's devastating, an accident, a tear, rips, is always a long process that you got to be careful, listen to your body. Your body will tell you a lot of things.
Yeah, pain.
Yeah, a lot of pain. So you listen to that pain and you just take it easy and then slowly graduate. So,
let's talk about how everything started, and then talk about some of the first arm wrestling you did, and then we move forward to championship competition and things like that.
Yeah, because of school and stuff like that, Shakey's, we had a Shakey's restaurant here in town before, Shakey's Pizza and that.
Oh, pizza, I love pizza.
Yeah,
I have to be very careful when you say pizza. I want pizza right now.
Yeah, for a single guy back then, every night they had something going on, so to go there was perfect to eat. But they threw arm wrestling championships there, and people told me to get involved in it. So I did. The first time I went into it, I only placed third, but I mean, I was a young guy. I was still in school, going against adults and everything else.
Oh, wow. Were the adults surprised when you knock them out?
Oh, yeah. And the guy that actually won the year prior, he was the one I had a 6-minute long match with. 6 minutes. Your arm is white, like your blood's draining out. Somebody else could just take your finger either way and just push that match to win. But I lost to him. But then it was the guy who always took second to him come up and thanked me and said, you wore that guy out so I could finally beat him. And then it was the following year, I went back to the same tournament and then won the tournament. And
so you're going against adults, right?
Oh, yes.
What were the reactions of these adults? Like when they saw you, they're like, oh, this kid is going to come in. Were they like, were they like, oh, there's no way? Like, what was the treatment that you get from the adults?
Yeah, it's, they're always surprised. I mean, it's almost like having your son beat you or something like that, right? Like sometime in life that may happen, I got 3 boys. They always keep trying my arm, right? Oh. They always want to keep trying to beat Dad. But I think they just appreciated it. You appreciate it. It was, you go all through the years of the history, arm wrestling's always been there, and it's always been a way of challenging another man to feel his strength, right? And so it was just something that I recognized how strong other people were, and then if I wanted to beat them, how much work I had to put into trying to go against them. But it was there that I met a lifetime friend, Keith Koenig, who ran the arm wrestling championships at that time for wrist wrestling across Canada. And he gave me, he is kind of like a schedule of all different types of tournaments going on throughout the province and everything else. And I just started going to him and really took to the wrist wrestling and really enjoyed it and kept going and going and going, and then started going to Alberta, then started going down to, my goal was to go down to Petaluma where the World Wrist Wrestling Championships were, and get into what's called the WAF arm wrestling, like the WAF, the World Arm Wrestling Federation. And finally got a chance over the years to go there, like I said, in 1983 to Costa Rica and win my first world championship as far as the world championship.
So when you went against these adults, what happened that you wanted to pursue it even deeper?
So taking it to the next level, there's kind of like an amateur events and then pro events, right?
So how do you went from amateur to pro?
So it was basically getting into an organization. And so I kind of stepped into an organization of wrist wrestling. It was actually competitive sport, arm wrestling and wrist wrestling, that all of a sudden I started going around different towns, winning the provincials. Then you started heading towards the Canadian Championships. And the idea of going to the Canadian Championships was then to represent Canada. So you then go on to a World Championship. So you'd represent your country. And I mean, for me back then doing that, it was huge. Like, I never ever thought arm wrestling would ever go that far. And so even I remember winning my first Canadian title, I was just emotionally drained almost more than physically, because it was just like, wow, you know, like here I am trying this, I think I'm all right, and but when you actually succeed, it's, you don't believe it sometimes. And then even at a world level, it was just like disbelief, like what actually happened? Like it just, but you know, you proved yourself, and you proved your abilities, your strength, your technique was working. So now it's to defend it. Right, because now once you get to the top, you have to defend your you know, that top position, and unfortunately after I went to the World Championships, won there, and then it was a year and a half later that actually I got in my accident.
So let's
started all over again.
Let's hold on to that right now. Let's go a little bit back. So you went from, I guess, amateur to pro, right?
Right.
So what was the difference between training yourself with amateur, and then what did you have to do to actually train yourself for a pro? Because it's probably a totally different kind of a building, right? So let's talk about some of that stuff. Like, how does it work? What do you have to do? Is it hard? Like, is it time? All that stuff.
It was harder. What it was each time you go and meet different people that had a different, almost like a different plateau in level of strength. So you'd arm wrestle, I mean, you'd feel their strength and go like, oh my gosh, like I thought I was strong. Now this guy's feels like a wall. Well, how can he feel that strong? What is he doing? The thing about arm wrestling is that it's not like any other sport in the way that, you know, you keep all of your techniques or your skills to yourself. It's actually everybody shares. So you may beat a person on the table, or you may lose to a person on the table. Well, after the event, then you can actually, you know, go and do some matches afterwards, do some after pulling. That's when you can actually find out how much closer in level of strength you are to that person, because you're not worried about a ready go where it's automatic speed, and sometimes you get beat on speed alone. Because
I don't know. So when you say speed, you're talking about like speed, right?
Yeah, because
what is the difference?
Because there's a referee that sets you up, and they set you up into a fair position with straight wrists, you know, looking for everything all aligned. Both opponents have to be that way. He says a ready go. That time, you got to be listening for that ready go, because it's a split second, and boom, it's over. And if you don't catch at what somebody's bringing you, you're out of the match before the match started. So you have to have some type of defensive move or a very offensive move, and work on your speed. We used to set a quarter down or a coin on a table, and we'd just say the ready go, snap down, grab the coin, just to build up your speed as fast as you could get. But then with that speed, you have to develop how fast and your strength in that would actually take that person, so that their arm would travel with the speed at the same time, that you're able to beat them with just straight speed before their actual strength engaged. So, and that was kind of the difference between arm wrestling and wrist wrestling. Wrist wrestling, you could actually load right up with the person, almost feel how much strength they had, ready, go. And it was a little bit, if you had that much more power than the person, it'd be fast. If you're very compatible with the person, you're in for a long match, and it was a level of strength and technique that would win that match out. With arm wrestling, you can actually have to be set up all with that ready go. If a person chooses not to load up with you, then you can't load up with them.
And when you say load up, what are we talking about here?
Load up is just grabbing a person's hand and you're starting to pull. Load up, squeezing their hand, kind of doing a little bit of a setup with some back pressure, a little bit of side pressure. But you have to keep it right, nice and level. If a person doesn't load up at all, it's just a free hand. So anything that your opponent is doing when they're loading up pulls your arm all over, which a referee can see, and says, you got to back off, so that you're actually sitting up straight, and no movement at all, no pressure, and then it's a ready, quick go, right? And So that's part of the technique. What you want to do at the table, how you want to approach your opponent, you know, how you want to kind of presume how the match is going to go, or what your game plan is.
Yeah. So you have to have a plan.
You have to have a plan.
Wow.
It's like playing a game of chess.
Yeah.
You know, you start your moves, but then your opponent is offering a bunch of, you know, moves back. So you got to have a game plan of everything that he goes and does. You have a counter move for it, and it really is. It's a back and forth. If you get somebody who's very matched to your strength and your skill level, that match is going back and forth, and it's just a small transition in that hand, wrist, arm
to win,
that is able to outmaneuver that opponent to actually be successful and win that match.
So when you are analyzing the situation, are you looking at facial expressions, body language, all of that stuff?
Yeah, everything comes to play. So when you usually when you're at a tournament, you always have people that are cheering for you or the other person. As soon as I grip up, everything goes silent. So now I'm so focused on that person, I can grab their hand, I can read, feel what they're trying to do, their transitions in their hand, what they're trying to set up to either get ready to counter for or be offensive on. Then I also watch for their facial expression, but mostly their breathing.
Oh, wow.
Let's
talk about that.
Because when you go ready, go, and you're in an equal match, now a person is pulling and pulling, they're holding their breath, they're going, and you wait for them to take a breath. On that single, you have a little bit of a break in that power because you're trying to push oxygen back into your muscles again, right? You take that breath, you watch for that breath, and you hit, right? Because they're not ready for it. They've got power, and that split second. And so everything goes down to, everything is so focused that that's all you see. And really, that's why referees have got to tap you or stop you from pulling, because you're so engaged in that match that everything around you, you're not even noticing. So you're pulling, and it's until that referee actually stops you, you don't stop. A lot of people go and do a quick, fast match, like a bang, and back up again. Well, if the referee doesn't see it, you don't get it, right? So you got to make sure that you actually get that pin down, and the referee sees it. If you stop, and now all of a sudden that you stop and you think you won, and a person goes and hits you, you lost.
You lost.
Right?
Oh, wow.
So
it's like crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like you learn. You learn a lot of stuff fast, and to be successful at it.
You mentioned focus. When you say focus, are we talking about that everything on your mind fades away? There's nothing but silence. And then your concentration is like laser focus.
Yes.
When you enter into that, you train yourself for that, right? You train yourself for that. So what happens in your mind? Like when you grab the person's hand, does everything in your mind stops and everything is automatic, or are you analyzing nonstop?
Your mind is always thinking. You go in with a game plan. So
as soon as
your training is part of the way that you're going to actually work on different moves that you may be able to try or use as an arsenal against your opponent, right? So you go in with a game plan. You go in, you set up. Today, it's so easy to study an opponent because of all the media, videos,
Facebook.
Everything is out there, so you can watch your opponent now. When I first started, all we had was mail, like write a letter, and I get my schedule of tournaments. Half of them would be over by the time the mail come to me. But now you can study everything, and I can remember back then as everything started to open up with the first videos online, the first, the open board that we could all talk on and learn about different opponents in different areas, and start studying people. Well, then it got into, okay, I've had a match against that guy, not that guy, but I've watched this guy compete against him, and I seen what was successful, and I knew what was successful against that guy. So now you can start working on different game plans of what you're going to play. But the funny thing about arm wrestling is that, I could beat you, but you can beat Joe over here, and Joe can beat me.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very weird thing. Just opposites of strengths, techniques, and styles one works for one person, but not for
other
the other.
person.
So it's a very weird thing. So that's why it makes it very interesting. And when you're in a tournament and you're in your different draws, how you get your name drawn, you're going against different people, of who you match up with, and then who they get matched up with later on, because it's just the different styles and techniques that will actually either weed you out or rise you to the top. And so it's, I always had worked very, very hard on what made it into actually like a, what would you call it? I didn't have to think about my move. So I just sat up, I knew my initial move.
So it was like almost
right
like
away, so it's instant. It was like a habit.
Yeah.
You know, you take 6 weeks to actually form a habit, and then it's good.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. I kept working and working on different moves so that they're a natural habit. I didn't have to think about it. My body was already doing it. Then once I actually got stopped, then it'd be like, okay, now I got to start feeling what their offensive is, and why are they starting to beat my control or beat my game plan. And then that's when it all kicks into all the training that you've done to feel your arm on this side and worked on different offensive moves to try and pull it back from that area, that you can equally now, okay, I got stopped, I'm starting to get pulled over, what am I going to do? And it's a lot. There's a lot to arm wrestling, from just arm wrestling with friends to a pro level, where, you know, it's like you knowing boxing or some street fighter knows how to fight, but going up against somebody who's a pro at it, it's just, there is just that natural barrier that when you actually train and study and, you know, learn all the different skills and techniques in the sport, you're going to excel and know that's much more than a person who just does it as a casual, fun thing.
Was there any time that you're arm wrestling and you're like, oh my God, this guy is stronger than me? And then you come up with some kind of a, I guess, technique that you knock him out? Let's talk about some of that.
So one guy that I had, and he was like a North American champ, Devin Bear. He was from down in the States, and I kept hearing about him, and so I started traveling down to the States quite a bit, and sure enough, in all the big tournaments, the Vegas tournaments, all these big tournaments, he would end up being there. And our match set was so similar, and the difference being was by the time I met him, I'd already lost the use of my other arm. So now I'm just fighting him as the one-arm bandit, right? And he's the top guy, being able to use both arms. Very formidable competitor, and has proved himself amongst other peers in arm wrestling. We would battle, and we'd get stopped dead center in the table, and we would fight it out for who was going to maneuver the other person. And even as you started getting the person down winning, all of a sudden now you get a counter move that's taking you out of your zone again, that all of a sudden you start getting pulled back. Oh, geez, I got to do something different again. And we had crazy battles, and they'd always be long matches that it would sometimes drain us to the point that we'd still have to compete and be so drained that these other guys that we normally could beat, we would lose to. So that's the difference. If you meet another guy of the same caliber, your same strength, everything else, and early in matches, you can actually burn both of yourselves out, so that when you're actually trying to go into the tournament to make it to the podium, now you've lost all your strength on that guy's, just that one match, that all these other guys that you could have probably made your way through, knocked them out through the tournament, you're struggling with every one of them. But he was one that always had to fight. And everywhere I went for a big tournament, we ran into each other, and I always knew. I always had a big match. I was lucky because I never ever lost to him. But every battle was a struggle. Like, one of the hardest guys, I used to walk into a tournament and I'd see him and we'd just smile at each other, because we knew we were going to be the guys in the final. You know. So,
are you guys friends now?
We are good friends. We are good friends over all these years. And And actually, he just went to an international arm wrestling world championship and won another one.
Yeah.
And his daughter won a world title too. So
wow.
Very, very happy for him, you know, sent him. Yeah, I actually had tears in my eyes because I know what it takes. And now to have your daughter there with you too, sharing the same victory with the sport that you've loved all your life, it was just amazing, I thought. And but yeah, no, very fortunate that way. And that's something that was different, traveling from your own country to other countries to compete against other people. You'd like to think there's a fairness. The referees are pretty fair, but sometimes it could be a little biased because you're not from their country. They're representing their guys. When I first went down to the States, it was like that. And I met Denise Waddles, who was, I basically call Mom in the sport because she runs the American Arm Wrestling Championships down there. And then Leonard Harkness, who's a top referee. And I remember my first few matches, man, they watched everything I was doing that could either get fouled out or get called on. And you can lose in a match just by fouls, elbow, starting too fast, you know, setting up on your wrist, getting, you know, if a referee is jockeying your arm around and taking you out of positions that you're naturally set up for and you've trained for, it can actually affect your match. And it wasn't until actually with Devin, we had prize money on I think it was like $1,500 for our match. And I beat him, like right away. Like the referee said, ready, go. I just slammed him, just took him right down. But I knew he wasn't ready. So I went and said, no, I want to have this match fair. I want to win this money fair. I didn't have to. I'd already won the money, won the match. And I was overruling referees. And it was after that match that I earned a lot more respect from the American arm wrestling referees because they seen that it wasn't just me against them or a nation against a different country, that I just loved the sport and I want to win it fairly. And every time after that, every time I set up, they'd always be jockeying the other person's hand and just leave me because they knew I've set up very fairly. I never ever wanted to take anything from my opponent. Always set up fair, made it easy to set up, ready, go. And if you ever watch arm wrestling, some of the biggest things in arm wrestling that's probably holds up the sport a little bit is how long it takes to set up. It's just way too much. But the referees do step in, usually within 30 seconds, and do a referee setup to set it up. But still, there's a lot of time now when a person's trying to watch a sport like this, they can get, you know, very like, oh, this takes forever. But I always made a point to work on, even the guys I train here right now, I always train them to do a very fair start so that they never have to make a referee struggle. And that's one thing I appreciate with the referees is make their job easier so that they can watch and make sure you're having a fair match.
Were people happy? I mean, if you go to another country and you win against them, sometimes, you know, people are not very excited, right? So let's talk about some of your championships. How many championships you had before your accident, and then we move forward to the accident.
So before my accident, like I said, I was doing several tournaments, winning provincials, went on to win the Canadian Championships that year, which I believe was in Westtown Ford in Alberta, and then we went to Costa Rica, right? So, and I was very lucky because I went with John Miastic, who was kind of like a president of arm wrestling, not wrist wrestling, but arm wrestling, that took our whole group down there. And here I was in Costa Rica, my first time in a foreign country. And, but, you know, as I was going through, I just had people that were cheering, but at that time I could arm wrestle with both arms. So I was very fit. Like I said, I rolled out, I would do 200 push-ups. I was doing all this crazy stuff.
How old were you?
21.
21?
Yeah, 21.
Wow.
And so it was very exciting. Like I kind of reached the pinnacle of where I wanted to reach. That was my goal, was to become a world champion. And now I reached it. And it was like, I did it.
How many championships you won at that time?
That was my only world championship. So I'd only brought it to that level. I'd won Canadian titles.
I've seen your
wrist
ball.
wrestling. In
I've seen
arm
the pictures
wrestling,
of your walls. It's
yeah,
packed. It's like you can make a couple of walls with that, with all your trophies.
Lots of events. And it's surprising though, about a quarter of those are what I did prior to losing the use of my left arm. Cool. After that was the one-armed bandit, won the rest.
So, so what happened with the...
It was a bad motorcycle accident. Riding a motorcycle, going up around a corner.
Yeah. How old were you?
At that time I was 25.
25?
Yeah. Okay. So prime of life type thing, eh?
Yeah.
Just young guy, you know, when you're almost choosing what you're going to do in life and everything else. At that time I was going to go for an underwater welder, everything.
Oh, wow.
Everything was all set up, you know, like I was want to go to PADI school, take my diving, take my welding, go off and do welding in Australia on the oil rigs. That was my game plan. Arm wrestling then, at that time they were doing, getting ready for the movie Over the Top with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, I remember that one.
Right? Yeah.
That was one of my favorite movies, actually.
Yeah. And so even got the papers from Canon Pictures to be a part of it. Yeah. Right? And they were looking for arm wrestlers that had won previously, and just to fill up the whole arena where they actually had the event. Yeah. And so, you know, kind of stoked at that time, like, oh, wow, this is crazy. But I got in my accident and got hit by a car, went down underneath it. The car ran over, you know, my left arm, up over my head, and then the rear kind of spit me out. And the rear tire went over my leg and hip and stuff. So it was quite an ordeal where it was bad enough that it ripped all the nerves in my back, where a year afterwards they were able to remove some nerves from my calves and put up into the brachial plexus here, and to try and get some movement out of my left arm. Yeah. Now, it wasn't until almost 3 years later that I could finally lift my arm up like this that helped me or enabled me to hold my kids. Well, I could at least hold a bag or a grocery bag or turn a handle, but that was it, right? So
what happened at that moment? What was going through your head? You thought it was over, or what was your
I didn't really think of the arm wrestling. I mean, all I thought about was, it was devastating because it was a you know, point in my life that you know, I was in a relationship, I was going for a career that I wanted to pursue, just, you know, was working out for going to this championship again. And then that happened. Everything was put on stop, right? And then it was like, well, how am I going to arm wrestle with one arm, you know? And then I was rejected in my relationship. And then the career that I was going to seek.
I mean, she broke up with you as soon as she saw you, you
know? Lasted for about 6 months, but we knew each other through sports, right? So to have somebody all of a sudden come to a standstill and not doing anything, and I couldn't. I was in a wheelchair. I was on drugs, everything else. It was very, very difficult. And it come to a point that it just, it was too hard for her. I was holding her back in the things that she wanted to do. You know, it was very homebound. The drugs I was taking, I mean, it was a tough
change
struggle.
Your mood? Did the drugs change your mood? Were you angry sometimes? Or
angry, very down and out, very depressed, right? You know, because at that time I thought I had everything going for me. You know, like I had a great body. I worked out. I felt strong. I was winning a world championship. Here I'm going to go off and do this great job that I thought would be great, and then it all changed, and so there's a lot of acceptance to that, right? Like, okay, what am I going to do with this? Like, how am I going to start over? And then it was actually the boxing that it was like, oh my gosh, this is almost like having my arm behind my back again. But now I got to learn how to do everything with this arm. Everything that I did with two arms, now I've got to do with one arm, you know? And it was a huge transition, and it took even then, it took like 2 years to even get back up to the table, because you know, my leg was broke and my hip was shattered. So, you know, to develop my stance at a table, and then not hang on to the peg to support my chest to, you know, compress all your strength across your chest to pull somebody. Every time everybody would arm wrestle me, it just pulled away from me. Like, it was just like, wow, what am I doing? you know, to the point that I almost was ready to give up.
Yeah.
And it was a fellow teammate, Ian Leslie, that kept working with me,
Yeah.
so I could develop my strength. And we tried different things. We're trying to hook up a harness and a belt and everything else to try and support me at the table. And nothing really worked, or it just constricted me even more.
Yeah. How did you fix that?
So I just had to keep working at it. I kept working at it. Now everything, I had to do one arm. So instead of those push-ups with 200, like with both arms,
Yeah.
now I started gotten to the point that I could do 50 one-arm push-ups, or doing chin-ups with one arm, right? I just had no choice. I had to make it work with one arm. I had no other choice. It wasn't like I could just untie this rope anymore that was holding my arm back.
Yeah.
It was done, right? And so then I just kept trying it and trying it and trying it. I couldn't do anything else. I was struggling with, you know, what type of job I'd get into, you know, who I'd meet, you know, like, was I good enough for anybody again? Or, you know, would everybody just see me as a disabled or a crippled person, right? And I wasn't ready to let go of aspiring in different things yet. I knew that I had an inner passion, really, of just always trying to excel at whatever I put my mind towards.
So how did you get back to it, and how did you become a champion again?
So it was just the time spent at the table with friends, everything else, kept training and training, learning my balance at the table so that I could actually, instead of pulling across now, I had to learn how to do everything and pull, rather than fighting against opponent's arm and pulling against their arm like this, opening their up, I just pulled them back, you know. So I had to learn how to pull back over this way so that all my strength was on this side, and I pulled back this way because there's nothing to offer any leverage or strength on this side to do anything with. So everything had to come back this way, pull and pull and pull. So I just developed a technique that worked very, very well for me, and I kept using it, and all of a sudden I started excelling in it again. So after many matches losing, all of a sudden now I started seeing those people again and started taking them down. Yeah. But so many people were, and I think that's what pushed me. So many people were just like inspired by me just even giving it a chance. I was the only one out there using one arm, right? Nobody else was doing it.
Were you shocked when you won?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know, I met many people that had lost their leg or something like that, but never an arm. Yeah. And so I think in the sport of arm wrestling, it was very, very different to think of somebody being able to have that same strength as another person using two arms. Yeah. And I just worked and worked and worked at it. Like I said, a lot of arm wrestling, like thousands, like I'm not kidding, thousands of matches of just training and pulling and working, seeing where my strengths were. Okay, this feels good. How much more can I work it and get better and better, excel at it? And then I finally won my BCs, finally won my Canadians, finally was, okay, World Championships, here I come again, down to the wrist wrestling, down to Petaluma, and won in Petaluma finally for the World Championships. And then many big tournaments in Vegas and stuff like that. And it was just, at that time then it was almost like being on a roller coaster, and I was on a ride. Like and I wanted to make it a wild ride. So I just kept going to every tournament I saw, focused on money tournaments so that I could make the sport pay for itself. So you'd go and win this money, then it would pay for these, pick out your next series events that you want to go. And I do it in a way that, who haven't I pulled yet? Okay, well, he lives here, he's going to show up here. That's what I do. I wouldn't run away from the top guys. I was there to meet them because nobody was coming up here to arm wrestle me. So I always had to go to these bigger events. And like I said, by that time, then I got to know a lot of the top directors in the sports. Like I said, with the Denise and Keith and John Miastic, Frank and Karen Bean, Dave Devoto, all these guys that were big in the affiliation in the world of arm wrestling, that would just keep saying, Vern, we want you at my event. I want you here. I want you here. and I would go and show up. Many times without the rest of Team Canada, I would just go by myself. I'd be the only Canadian representative.
Yeah.
And but people were just in disbelief that I'd be arm wrestling with one arm. Yeah. And they'd always be, didn't take too long to get a long, big support yelling and screaming, even though I was focused and I didn't even hear them. Yeah. But they were always cheering and always coming up like, oh man, and people would, I'd see people crying because it would just be like, wow, like, how did he do that? How did he do that? Or I'd always get the recognition from my fellow opponent where they shake hands. That's one thing I like about the sport. It is a gentleman's sport.
Yeah, it's respectable.
Very respectable. So you always respect your opponent. You know, it's you shake hands going in, you shake hands afterwards, and then you go sit down and party with them afterwards, or you after training with them, or they're your best friends. Yeah. You know, never met this person before, but he's the top guy. I got to go over and beat him. Great, I beat him. Now we're great friends, right? Until the next time I got to beat him again, and then it's like, okay, I got to focus on trying to beat you again. So,
what were some of your thought process when you were going through this to get back again? What was going through your mind? Were you in disbelief? Like, can I do it? Can I not do it?
Like I said, many times I was in disbelief as far as I felt the pain and the struggle. Every time I first started arm wrestling and taking those losses to people that I used to beat, I'd be like, you know, why? Why am I doing this? All I'm doing is hurting my arm. My rest of my body already hurts. Why cause more pain? Right? But it was enough that what else do I do? So it was like, okay, this sport has given me a chance to try and prove myself with just one arm. This is what I'm going to try and excel at. So I just kept doing everything. I kept reading about who was doing what. I kept getting different guys. The whole time I'd always keep training people here in town. Always kept a team going. So I always had lots of arms to pull against. And most of the time, it's always big guys. You know, I never get a lot of guys my size. So always bigger guys, so that whenever I'd arm wrestle, and I'd go and enter, because arm wrestling now is a lot of, it's all done by weight classes, even by age now. And, but I'd go against guys in my class, and I was used to hanging on to bigger arms and bigger strengths. That now when I went against them, it just felt so much more better. I was in my zone.
So you mentioned you have kids. How did you meet your spouse? What is that love story?
What's that love story? I actually seen her in the paper.
You've seen her in the paper?
I seen her in the paper.
Did you fall in love as soon as you saw her?
Almost. I seen her in the Miss Teen pageant thing there, and I seen all the girls in there, and I seen her. And
how old were you?
At that time, I was 26.
26?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I seen her. I went to Earl's restaurant, a big restaurant that we go to here. And she was there. She's standing there with a jacket of another guy's name on it. And I was like, okay, well, she's taken. But I seen her, and I was like, wow, she's awfully pretty. You know what you bring to the table sometimes when you're in a relationship? I knew what I was bringing, and I was like, I'm not bringing everything to the table. And but it was like she just overlooked everything, and she actually made me smile. You know, a girl was making me smile. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I just wrote her a card at Christmas time and everything, how much she made me feel. And she invited me out for dinner.
Oh, wow.
And it just started from there. Everything just matched up so well. And, you know, like, it was the first time that I started actually really starting to kind of love myself again. You know, because I'd kind of gone away from that. That, you know, I didn't like what I saw in the mirror when I'd look at myself anymore. And I started to appreciate myself a little more, you know. Somebody actually was loving me. Well, then kids happened, you know. And
how many kids do you have?
5.
You have 5 kids?
5,
That's amazing.
Yeah. And you know what it's like having a child. I mean, these are like new loves that you never even knew you had before. You know, it's kind of like...
You're in love with all the kids. Right?
Yeah, all these new loves. They just seen me all the time. They never knew what it was like to see me with 2 arms, right? And they just adapted to it. They never thought of anything of it unless one of their friends said something. But their friends would come over, and I'd always be arm wrestling in the garage with all people and they'd see it, and even them, they didn't really look at me in the sport until later when they were actually in school, and they had to do assignments like, you know, write a thing about somebody who does very well in a sport. That all of a sudden they go in on the internet and typed in my name, and all of a sudden all this stuff come up, and it's like,
they're proud of
wow, look at this, my dad, and or my friends would of theirs would go like, wow, your dad's a world champion, or at that time a lot of school teachers or PE teachers would bring me to the schools to go and put on tournaments at the schools for the students and stuff like that, and they would love it, right? And here's their dad going to their school putting on tournaments, and it's their dad. So
are you still married?
Yes.
Are you still in love?
Still in love.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a very rare thing, you know.
Yeah.
Usually people fall apart.
Yeah, it's been 33 years.
33 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So those kids aren't kids anymore. They're three of them are taller than I am. All my boys are taller than I am. And my two daughters, and they're all doing very, very well. And you know, I did have that one chance that I took my daughter to the provincial championships, and she won the BC title at it in arm wrestling. But all my boys were always about the same size as I was, so they would have to compete against me. So they said, forget it.
So do you start training your kids in arm wrestling? Were there any interest?
They fooled around with it.
Yeah.
It was always there. They always seen everybody in the garage that would come over and just arm wrestle, and they'd fool around with it. But I mean, it was just, I let them do their own things.
Yeah.
You know, I let them do their own things. I got them involved in like Taekwondo and stuff like that, so they'd learn how to protect themselves in school, the same thing, so they wouldn't have to go through harassment or anything. But I let them do their own things, and they all, you know, steered their own courses. I didn't want to be one of those ones that was very strict to, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
I just loved having kids, you know. I loved spending time with them. The time with them that you actually eye to eye spent with them it's very hard when people go and say, like, do you ever spend like 5 minutes with your kids? Oh yeah, I spend 5 minutes. No, like one-on-one with them, looking at them, giving them your full attention. 5 minutes is a long time when you actually do that, staring at each other, talking and doing stuff.
People don't stare each other's eyes anymore. Everybody's like,
no,
you know, it's
no.
like going crazy.
And so to actually do that with their kids, I always wanted that. I always wanted to speak to them directly. We'd always have play and fun time and everything else. And it was great. I loved raising my kids, and now it's so quiet that they're gone. But, you know, now I have
grandchildren.
Always grandchildren, yeah.
You have
fifth on the way.
Oh,
fifth one on the way, yeah. And, but I have the guys for almost every decade, always different guys coming into arm wrestling. Some guys have stuck with it over the years. But we always get together. We're still arm wrestling, and you know, I went through my accident. I went through stage 4 cancer.
You went through cancer too?
Cancer, yeah, stage 4 cancer. It was like 4 to 6 months I was given to live.
What kind of cancer?
It was a stage 4 metastasized malignant melanoma, and it had gone into my lymph nodes where it was traveling up. So I went on a trial drug. Had to go on a trial drug. There was nothing else actually offered.
Did it fix it, right?
Yeah, it's been almost 9 years now since then. Wow. And then, so that again tore me down. You know, I went down after my accident, built myself up, went through cancer. It took a lot out of me. It took a lot of muscle atrophy, which was known for the drug. Wiped out my thyroid, pituitary, and thyroid, pituitary, and I forget the other gland.
Lymphatic.
Not so much lymphatic, pituitary, thyroid, and adrenal glands.
Adrenal gland. Oh,
yeah.
Wow, that is.
So my whole adrenal system was actually very much compromised, which left me very acceptable for getting sick. Which COVID hit. And I ended up in the hospital again, like almost dying from COVID. Right, and so each time I've had to come out and build up. But the thing that's always helped me get past it has always been arm wrestling. So every time I'd have all my strength removed from me. What I counted on to get better and build my strength back up was arm wrestling. So, you know, I'd call the guys back. Guys, come back over now. I'm back. Let's try this out. You know, doctors would just shake their head. What are you doing? Like, you shouldn't be doing this, right? but it was my way of healing.
Yeah. So looking at your journey, like you're somebody who never gave up. Now looking back and looking right now, what are some of those lessons that you have learned?
Lessons? The biggest thing
that
is
you can pass down.
patience.
Patience. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Patience, big one, because there are so many things that I go to do, and now I'm stuck doing with one arm. You know, lifting a 50-pound box, right? You're used to grabbing it with two arms. Well, now I have to take it, find the balance point, and lift it up. You know, and people who would work with me would always go like, "Oh man, that's crazy! Like, there's no way they could do it." You know, be doing trampolines and stuff. It was just that was the biggest thing, because a lot of times it wouldn't work all the time, and I'd be like flustered. You know, like, why is it so hard? Everything's like a song and dance before it actually happens, and so I had to develop patience. That was the biggest thing, because everything, it's too easy to get mad at things, where it takes that second to kind of take that breath, hold it, and go, okay, think about it, you can do it, it's just going to be different, and it might be harder, but you can still do it if you put your mind to it. So that's the biggest thing that I would say is never giving up was another one. Always striving, you know, if you have a passion, you know, don't let it sit there. Just build off of that passion, move forward on it. Set goals for yourself so that there's something always there for you to try and achieve or reach for. You might never ever get it, but sometimes it's always a nice little journey just trying to get there. You may not always get there, but it's the journey getting there. Is so fulfilling.
What do you love about your wife? Because I think she's a very, very powerful, person in your life, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
What do you love about her?
My wife is just very strong in her beliefs. She's very creative, you know, which supports her in the job that she does. She's an event designer, and she looks after a lot of things in town, and lots of functions in town where she organizes things. So she supports me in being me. You know, so she understands what I need and gives me my time to do that. So, you know, I don't spend time on the TV watching lots of sports and stuff like that, but I have to take my couple of hours and spend with arm wrestling. She always appreciated me with all the time that I give my kids, still, the grandkids, you know. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that her appreciating me for what I am and what I can do, and supporting me.
Before we finish, do you have anything else you want to add to your story? Anything else you want to talk about?
I think the biggest thing is that I've been so lucky to get into a sport that I fell in love with, and that people in the sport actually would find me a worthy opponent or would believe in me. And that was the biggest thing. Like, you know, I met some incredible people from around the world that we still communicate all the time. And friends, like the amount of friends from arm wrestling has just been incredible, that it's like a family. I've become part of a family, and that's what we call it in arm wrestling. It's a big family out there, that we're all family. We call each other brothers, or, you know, like my brother and my bro. And but especially from the director side, you know, like the Denise Waddles, the Keith Gonigs, you know, the Dave DeVotos, the Frank Guerin. All those guys who are top people are so busy with organization, putting stuff on, but taking that little bit of time to give me something. Like when I was super sick, and I went to my first thing after walking out of the cancer clinic and going to going for a Canadian title. I had 50% of my strength, and I was going to this Canadian championship. It was part of the Arm Nation TV series that I did. And Denise Waddles, who's down in the States, down there, you know, I'm a Canadian boy, and here she sends me this award with this, you know, that says the people around the world are supporting and loving you, and it's got this globe that she just sent to me. Like it just floors me how even now, when I'm not even as involved in the sport as I used to be, that they still reach out all the time, like, wish you were here, want you to be here, would send me T-shirts from events that I never went to, World Championships or, you know, Arnold Classics, you know, because I got to meet Arnold and Sylvester Stallone and stuff like that, winning Arnold's event there a couple of times and being on the stage with him, you know, just so many incredible things that come from the sport that people probably don't get a chance to, even in sports that they get involved with, that I've met, and people that I admire.
Okay, perfect. So, Vern, I'm saying your name right, Vern?
Vern.
Vern. R is very hard for me. Vern, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you for sharing your stories. It's very deep.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I very much enjoy it and very much telling my story.
Thank you very much. Always follow your passion, because without passion, life is boring. What do you say to that?
I will support you 100% on that.
See you on our next episode.